Okay, 2001. I believe I picked the new Hitler.
Yes, you did.
Once again, not necessarily the best thing I wrote in 2001, but the most emblematic, and the one that kind of gets the point across the fastest, I suppose. 2001 was a pretty horrible year. At the end of the year, I decided to go to the LaGrange Library every day. I was working a job where I worked from 3 in the morning till 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. It was a very weird job. And so I had my, and I would go to bed at like 8 at night. But I would go to the library around, let's say, 5 or something, or 6, and maybe stay till they closed, and then go home and go to bed at 10 or whatever, And I decided I was going to give myself 2 weeks or whatever it was, and I was going to try to go as often as I could. And whatever came out was going to be released as this book, War is Terrorism. That was the idea. So whether it was the best stuff I'd ever written, or whether it was terrible, whether it was outright mediocre, I had made the decision I'm putting it out, period. And it was sort of the anti-book. And this is the other thing. You're going to notice very soon that there's a big change happening in my work, a pretty big fucking change. And you can look at the 2001 War is Terrorism period. You can look at that as either the end or the first sign of the beginning. Where the dividing line between the end and the beginning is, you can debate. But War is Terrorism was the, I don't even know how to put it. It was the first of its kind. How about that? And where I think things, for lack of a better word, conceptual? I don't know how to put it even.
Definitely transitional.
Yeah. So but the idea was that I was going to, the idea was to take this concept, to take 9/11, and that I was going to use 9/11 as an excuse to write one-dimensional stuff, to start reteaching myself how to write. I was going to use 9/11 as a prop and then put it out. And almost, so instead of, I used to write one-dimensional political stuff. I was now commenting on writing one-dimensional political stuff by writing one-dimensional political stuff, if that makes any sense. So it was, and not in an ironic way.
No, that's important.
But using it as almost like a personal rehabilitation, a creative rehabilitation, and using it as a starting point, and understanding that I could now take this in any number of directions. The other thing was, I wanted to keep writing, and I knew that. And so even though I was in this sort of worn-down state, I knew that I wanted to keep creating material. And my thinking was, George Bush is going to get elected again in 2004. There's no way between now and then that this country is going to get sick of him. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say everything I can possibly say about him and the war and this culture. By the way, the war did not exist yet, and I was already fucking calling it War is fucking Terrorism. I want to make that clear. I was writing this before the war even started. But I wanted to say everything I had to say about this guy, this war, this culture, the whole thing, this horrible cataclysmic event, this fucking tragedy that had happened, I wanted to say it in one succinct shot and never touch it again. That was my original idea. So I was not even going to write political stuff ever after this, because I was just going to point to War is Terrorism. The other thing, when I talk about, and this is, like I say, it wasn't ironic, but the whole idea of writing one-dimensional stuff about one-dimensional stuff, in a sense, that was even calling it War is Terrorism. That was not my title. I saw that that was all over Chicago at the time. somebody had printed. It was like 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, and everywhere you went, you would see it up on a wall, just taped. War is terrorism. Prison, indeed, actual prison slogans. So I was like, fuck, that's it. War is terrorism. I was like, I'm not even going to come up with my own title. That's it. War is terrorism. I'm fucking taking it. I created inserts very much in the style of the war is terrorism, encouraging people. There's a note on the introduction. Please make photocopies of this and paste it up. Shit, I'm contributing. I'm on your shit, dude. You know what I mean? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not even trying to create my own fucking movement or anything. I see this dude, he's doing it. You know what? I'll give you some back. Here, we'll do a little bit more distro for you, you know. The cover, well, I mean, think about the fucking cover. The cover is, how stylized can you get of like the ransom note / punk rock lettering on it? You know what I mean? And then the cover itself, a little bit more prescient stuff for you people out there. The cover is taken from the U.S. military. That shit is free to take. I figured they'd taken from us, and they certainly were taking from the people they were invading, so I'll take one from them. That was part of that idea. And the other thing is, that plane, the picture of the plane, you would never know it, but it was a little secret meaning for me. That picture of the plane on the cover is a plane flying over Iraq in 1996. An occupation in 1996. Or in Iraq. And this was 2 years before the war, or a year and a half before the war started. And I used that as the cover. So... the New Hitler was the very first thing I wrote for the book. Sat down at the table, wrote it. And I walked, I think I wrote 2 other pieces that night. They were good too. One of them I used, 2 of them I didn't. But I was like, New Hitler, I'm with it. It says what it has to say. You'll read it. You can see what it's about. You know, I don't need to fucking explain it to you. But, I just hit the ground running and fucking wrote it like a newspaper, but not a newspaper. A newspaper about a newspaper. Commenting on newspapers that existed at the time. Because if you look at all the other stuff I had, and some of the stuff isn't in that book, but like Super Germs, Our Dark Side, and all the other stuff, like those were all literal headlines. So what's the terminology for that about what I was doing? How should we phrase that?
I don't know.
Is there a way to make that understandable? So I call it. I wasn't doing point and shoot anymore. I don't even know what to call it.
Were you doing point and shoot?
Before that, you know what I mean? It was what it was, or it wasn't what it wasn't. But this was now. There was no way to take this at face value at this point. Do you know what I mean? It was about 20 other things that aren't even on the page. It's like implications and connections, you know? I don't even know. I don't even know. I hate to use the word it meta.
Reducta saturation? There's a dash in there.
Yeah.
You pick where it goes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this was, I don't know. Me playing the part of Rich Millett in order to become Rich Millett again. By not being Rich Millett. And using 9/11 as like a totemic thing that I could attach things to. You know. Because I don't really address 9/11 particularly all that often in the book. There's one sort of reference to it directly. But there's not a lot, you know what I mean?
That's important to make the whole thing work.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. 2002?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I don't even know where to fucking start on this one. Fucking people. God help us all. All right. Is it okay? I wrote... Jesus. Starting in the spring of 2002, by this point, I was with Liz. I had a good work situation going on, and I decided that I was gonna what the inklings of what had happened with war as terrorism, and then with another sort of odd thing which didn't come out under my name but was called Tapes, Tales, and Targets, where I did some pretty crazy editing stuff and some pretty serious abstraction work on. I decided to go forward and really create the new thing now. You know, I was going to start this whole new life. If I could have changed my name, I would have. Because I felt that there was now a very thick line separating what had come before. You know, it would be like everything I had done up until 2001 was like I was in a band called the Jamborees or something, and now this was like a new band. This was a whole new thing, you know, or like Godard starting the Ziga Vertov collective or something. This was a whole, you know, and he stopped putting his name on his movies, that kind of shit. Like this was like a whole new thing. It wasn't just about me having different phases or going through things. This was I was now completely breaking with the past. And originally, it wasn't even supposed to be a book. I was just going to write for a year. And that was actually a big deal for me. I was writing things that no one was ever going to see. I was just purely exploring two things: exploring and reteaching myself how to do all of this, because I had come up with and we won't get into this, but I had come up with a series of techniques, a series of creative techniques, and a whole methodology and a whole philosophy that goes with it. And I basically created I feel like I've always had a self-contained series of methodologies for creating things, and I've always said that it's a fully integrated sort of, a fully integrated network, but this was like taking it into another dimension. This was giving it fucking wings, and really solidifying it. Really, actually, what it was giving continuity, because before that I would just lurch about, and I was always in search of inspiration, and things would either happen or not happen. It was either cosmic or not cosmic, and what I learned was that those rules no longer applied. There was no such thing anymore as inspiration, and there was no such thing anymore as cosmic or not cosmic. That was all gone. I learned all of those things did not exist, and what there was illumination, which is always all the time. It was out of the realm of cause and effect, or happen or not happen. That was obsolete. It was boring, and didn't exist, and it's been gone forever. And I was so glad to learn that. And there was no such. Oh, okay. There was no such thing anymore as like I say, like inspiration. So I started writing, and eventually what I discovered was I did, in fact, have a book of material, which I decided to eventually put out. As far as a book of material, I came up with a lot of other material. Here, should we?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you need? I know. Okay. So anyway, I wrote probably about 120 pieces from May into October or November of 2002. And somewhere around September or so, it became obvious that there was a book that was happening. But I actually came up with the ideas for part of the idea for what became Trace and the Nib Signal. The very beginnings of Scatter were birthed then. The very beginnings of Splish were birthed then. And the very beginnings of Present were birthed then. Every single thing I have done, with the exception of this compilation, and what will continue to come after it, the two books that are going to be coming out at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, whichever. Every single thing I have done is directly related back to the process that created Radar Grain. It is the Big Bang. Everything resonates from it. It is the birth. And People is one of the big fucking pieces that came out of that birth. It was written probably about 2/3 of the way through the book. The idea for Radar Grain was that there were going to be 4 major pieces in it. And then there were going to be shorter pieces. So that's where you get stuff like Everyone and Day and The Painter and I Got Away Alive and Sane. The idea was that you would have these sort of shorter pieces that were maybe more easily understandable, sort of supporting the bigger pieces. And that's always kind of been the case with Political Glitter. All the Political Glitter was built around I Never Run Out of Money and Do You Believe in Love at First Sight. They were the two totemic, Fear was written around pornography, lust, set, and game strategy. Those were the, so this was not new to me, but this was the first time I had been this sort of severe about it, So it's animals, apples, people, and insects are the kind of 4 major pieces. And people is, I did a reading of it over the summer, and it went over yet again. I mean, it's a good, very strong fucking piece of work. The beginning, the I Am a Young Man closed off in this room, and it ends with that section ends with the reprise, semi-reprise of the first verse, several, bit down the page. That is written to there's been a ton of it. It's written to the melody of I Am John Johanna. What are the other tunes? What is it? The Trail of the Buffalo. Fuck. There's a ton of folk songs that have been written to that tune. Neil Young did it with Captain Kennedy. So you could take I'm a Young Man and go all the way down to the end of that section, and you could sing it to that tune. It is written to that tune exactly. It does not vary at all. That was done deliberately. That was a very, very, very conscious decision. And the young man in question is I am envisioning John Walker Lind, who was very big at the time in the paper as the single reason why we had to fight the terrorists. It was basically envisioning him hijacking NASA. It's not pro or con. I mean, it's not, I personally think that John Walker Lind was held up as a very sad kind of scapegoat. But the piece itself does not comment on that either way, one way or the other. It's a vision of him. Neither good nor bad. Then we go into the parts. I watched a thing about Nero, and I took Nero and a couple other emperors and combined them, and that's where we go into the part about the emperor. I just sat there and took notes and I put it all together. So all the stuff about the little minnows and whatever, and the nursing the viper and whatever, Palatine Hill, that's all highly specific. You can go through and check your history books on that stuff. And then we come back into present times, and there's a little sort of philosophizing, and then the thief entered. We go into a little bit of George Bush, kind of oblique commentary on George Bush. And then we get into there's a transition verse, and then we get into, in a way, kind of what my favorite part of this whole thing. The first, what I called at the time, my term for it was the individual portraits. So you've had this poem, which is a mind movie. So you've had the scenes of John Walker Lindh in a NASA situation. Then it goes back in time to the Roman Empire. Then it comes back to modern times, but slightly dystopian. Then you have some philosophizing, and then you get into the individual portraits. So if you're watching a movie, this is now like tight headshots, or just a depiction of a static scene, like a camera maybe down the field, and you're just watching this thing unfold, maybe at something of a distance, or perhaps very up close, whichever one you like better. And so the individual portraits, it started with the girl on the horse. That was the first one. I think that was a piece independent initially. I think I was just going to write a one verse of that, but then I decided to take it and put it in here. The rest of the individual portraits, however, are pretty, if you know your stuff on this, if you've read the books, pretty highly specific depictions of scenes of what various members of the Manson family were up to in the days leading to, and in the case of the LaBianca family, the day of the murders. And that's how it ends, with the individual portraits. So taking the Manson whole thing and taking it way the fuck out of context, but actually painting it very realistically and highly detailed and very specific. Out of context, yet highly specific. Individual portraits. So you would never know that there's something incredibly sinister going on. You would never know. But it's there. Oh, and no. And the night of the Tate murder, too. Because, yes, I have the murder of Steve Parent in here. But you would never know that. That's people. So how do all those things connect? Well, you're not fucking stupid, are you? All right, moving on. I'm not going to connect it for you. I'm not your fucking dad.
I could do all the work.
I had to write it. That took forever. Are you kidding me? What are you laughing at? That was a lot of work to write that son of a bitch.
It looks like it.
It took forever.
I'm sure.
All right, 2003. Slow Boat to China. Oh, we're going to go in the opposite direction. Slow Boat to China was actually written, the very, very, very first idea of it. It was called Slow Boat to China. It's 2000, at the very end of 2002. Even though Radar Grain had codified around these 10 poems that were going to be in the book, I wanted to stay true to the original concept of it when there was still no book. So even though I was trying to finish the book, I still kept generating new material, which I had no intention of putting into Radar Grain, because I wanted to maintain the continuity and maintain the integrity of what I was doing. So it came time to write the next book. And good God, it went through a lot of weird fucking variations, which I'm not even going to start to get into here. But Slow Boat to China was the first. There was Green Handprints, and then Philadelphia came. And for several months, I just rewrote those 3 poems in conjunction with each other over and over and over again. There's like 50 versions of each. It just went on and on.
Really?
And
50?
20.
Okay.
But that's lots of versions. And they just sort of... And there was another one called The Ballad of Jefferson, which sort of snuck in there too. But it was mainly those 3, and they just sort of kept... So instead of writing lots of material like I had done in 2002, I was basically just working on these 3 poems, and just varying them a little bit each time, but they always were in conjunction with each other, And so we moved to Oak Park, and I decided, okay, I have to fucking pull this book together. This has to become something at this point. And so I did pull it together, and I think it's great. I think in some ways, Trace the Nim Signal is actually even superior to Radar Grain. because for what it accomplishes, it's really challenging, and it really lays down the template for everything that came forward, because Radar Grain was very definitive, and it painted not just the actual content of the book, but the direction of it. It was very definitive. It was like it presented like a path, and I had to do something that was connected to it, but also letting the reader know, yeah, but we're going to do all this other stuff too, And Radar Grain was sort of like a very like rustic meal, like a classically made like Italian meal, and everybody sits at the big table and enjoys it, and they're telling stories and they're laughing, and that's what Radar Grain was like. Tracing the Nim Signal was like asparagus and toffee, served in lemonade. You know what I mean? And like, it had to, like, Radar Grain was something that I think people could kind of understand. And it was fucking spaghetti and meatballs and wine and, and I had to say, okay, it's that, and there's going to be these traditional elements, and there's whatever, but it's also going to go way the fuck over here.
Yeah, you definitely sense a turn. Absolutely, when you compare the two.
And we have to include this stuff. But Tracing the Signal also does have wildflowers and newly forming land. I mean, there's elements of that stuff. Maybe like the rustic potatoes. There's also the, you know what I mean? So, it had to have that. And so Tracing the Signal, I pulled Slow Boat to China. I mean, I could have pulled Philadelphia, but I also used that in the first 4 years, so I decided not to pull that one. But Slow Boat to China is built around a very simple idea. It's built around my drive home from work at the time. And I just took it and abstracted it into all these other situations and all these other little scenes. But the basic, simple idea of it was, like, I'm driving home, and this is what I'm seeing. But I took it and spun it out into all these other scenes and making allusions to all this other stuff that happens.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of it, because it was just such a simple idea. And to take it, and I did the same thing with Philadelphia. Philadelphia was based on looking out a window. You know what I mean? And Green Handprints was if you have a copy of Present, there's the picture of the childhood thing with the green handprints. Guess what? That's where fucking Green Handprints came from. So they started off with these like extremely fucking simple ideas, and I would just take them and, well, what if we put in a, like, how about a fucking monologue about a Dustin Hoffman movie that doesn't exist, Oh, we'll put in that thing about the, and we'll have it end like like I'm gonna Slow Boat to China ends with like a fucking meter, like it's been going la-di-da-di-da, like it goes off, and well, what if we did that to it?
Sounds fun as fuck.
Well, that's one of the reasons I enjoyed doing it so much. And by the time we get to the end of that book with Open the Door, Richard, I fucking have put cement mixing instructions in there. You know what I mean? Like, like I was having a good old time making that thing. I had a blast. It was really fun. So, but Slow Boat to China, I mean, I don't even know what else to say about it. I mean, that's what it is. So we can move on.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear explanation.
Yeah. Okay. So 2004. Water. Water is, as of this late date, probably the last sort of hit that I had. No, Life Isn't Hard, too, actually. No, Life Isn't Hard is probably the last hit, but Water was probably the last time I got, like, a big thing centered around one piece. Like a kind of big reaction beyond the circle of people that normally read my stuff, And this is why Water happened. I will now tell you the story of Water. We did Tracing the Nim Signal, which came out at the very end of 2003. And by this point, Liz and I were living in Oak Park, and we didn't really have any friends. We were just kind of... We went to go see Star Spangled to Death. And if you ever get a chance to see that incredible movie, audience, I cannot fucking recommend it enough to you. It's by Ken Jacobs. It's about as perfect as it gets. It had a pretty big impact on me. And one of the things that had a big impact on me was, they're running around Brooklyn. Were they in Brooklyn or was Manhattan? No, they're in the Village.
Yeah,
They're running around the Village wearing like fucking inner tubes on their heads. You know, it's the middle of the Eisenhower era. Ike doesn't give a fuck about them. They're not on his radar. They're not a part of his America. But as a result, they are running free. I mean, there's nobody policing them, you know. They are, as a result of the repression, as a result of the exclusion, they have absolute freedom, and they're making like the most far out art. I mean, they are really, what they're doing is they're creating the future, right? I mean, they are the future. And that is how Liz and I felt in Oak Park, in this apartment where we couldn't turn the heat on and we didn't have any friends. We were like, you know, and we did Trace the Minimum Signal, and then right after that we did the Live and Nude and Helpless performance, which eventually you'll see. And I just felt like I was firing on all cylinders. I mean, I just felt like, you know, I can do anything at this point, you know. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to go in the complete opposite now of Live and Nude and Helpless and do something. By the end of Live and Nude and Helpless, I was like completely extemporizing whenever we would perform. I mean, I didn't even have pages in front of me by the end of it. I didn't even have my glasses on. You know what I mean? Like I went way beyond not reading anymore. You know what I mean? Like I was purely extemporizing stuff. And I had never done that before. And I was like, well, now we're going to go way the hell the opposite. Because the whole idea of From Radar Grain onwards is, you know, everything is on the grid. So we can go anywhere because we know where we are in relation to everything else. You know? So everything is explorative, but there's no unknown territory. If that makes any sense. You know? So even if we don't know, we know, but we know that we don't know, but we know that we know that we don't know, but we know. You know? And, we'll edit that part out.
Nope.
But, I wanted to start doing scatter. And scatter was the height of discipline and the height of writerliness and the height of structure. You know, we were going to take the structural experiments of Radar Grain and what had been structural experiments on only 4 of the pieces, the 4 big pieces I was talking about. I was now going to make an entire book like that. And it was going to be linear. It was going to be one continuous thing from start to finish. And I wanted to print it on a dot matrix printer, so it was going to be unbroken, you know. I mean, so talk about extremes and talk about mapping out the territory. Well, what ended up happening was there was where I worked, there was, I'm not in that department anymore, haven't been for many years, but the administrative assistants, there was a big fear that there was going to be a lot of layoffs. And so what the head of the unit did, a woman by the name of Yvetta Bullock, what she did was she started having skills building sessions. And we had to read this book that she would give us, and she would sort of assign like little homework assignments. And it was basically like about understanding what you have to offer, or trying to get you to build on things that you would do normally, maybe encouraging you to go back to school to focus on certain things. She did it, you know, I really admire the fact that she took the time to do that. You know, that was really a beautiful gesture on her part. And so anyway, so one of the things that we had to do is we had to pick sort of like a theme. And so the theme that she gave us was elements. And so we had to write something based on an element. And so I picked water. And I never read this book, by the way. She had wanted us to read. I never even opened it. It in fact never even came home with me. I left it on my desk at work. But she would talk about this stuff with the elements, and most people, you know, the people can usually relate to one element more than the others, you know. And I was like, well, fuck it, I'm water. I'm everywhere. I'm in the atmosphere. I'm ice. I'm liquid. I'm solid. I'm all things. So I'm going with fucking water, you know. And so we had to write something. And she said that we could write whatever we wanted. And so she suggested writing a poem And I was like, I can write a poem about water? And she was like, yes, and, you know, you'll have to, like, present it. I was like, oh, get the fuck out of here. So I was going to, like, literally, like water, and then do scribble scrabble, like like XRBQJ underscore, you know, and then have.
How would that be presented then?
And then who gives a shit? And then have something in fucking German, and then like a transcript from like the Oliver North trial, and then like a mother hen nursery rhyme or something, and make it completely anarchic, and you know, that's what I was going to do. And I thought, ha 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 ha, this will be the best gag ever. I'm going to run with this. Ha 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 ha, right? And then she talked to me about it because it was funny because she saw my enthusiasm and she took it like I was really engaging with this. She didn't realize in my mind, like, oh, I'm going to turn it into the, like, into the fuck all of the century. She thought, like, oh, isn't it great that he's in, you know, because everybody else is like fucking dead-eyed carp, you know? And so, so she starts like talking to me about like seriously, and like why did you choose water? And all of a sudden I'm like, I can't just on ego go because I'm everywhere. Like I can't. All of a sudden I can't do that, you know. And so but it hit me, and I was still going to do the sort of the freak out thing, you know. I still wanted to do that, but then it hit me, you know. I could fucking do like something linear. And then I could write something else with it. And we could put it as a self-contained unit. So it wouldn't be a full book. It would be a two-sided statement. And we can make artwork for it and have it interrelated and interconnected. And this will be the lead-up to Scatter. This will be my dry run for Scatter. This could be something. I could make a self-contained statement. Not over the course of a book, but over the course of these two pieces. This is really interesting. And that's what I set about doing. And I worked feverishly hard, and the piece ended up never being presented because I was like 6 weeks late. But the funny thing was, I never got busted on it. I never got in trouble because what I kept doing was I kept handing Wyvetta's assistant, this woman named Paula Spengler, I kept handing her my drafts. And so they saw this thing go from like the opening section, like this part, like I initially gave her that, then it became that, then this part. So they watched this thing grow. And so when it came time to present, I'm like, I was up to the Land of Groats part, right? I was like, it's not ready yet. And at first they thought I was trying to get out of it. I'm like, but here's what I have so far. So I ended up giving them copies of Water when we actually put it out finally.
With the artwork and everything?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Because I was like, I'm really working at this. Like, this is a, you know.
Yeah.
So it went way beyond some bizarre assignment for my
Did you hit them with some story like, you've inspired this whole thing for me, or something like that?
Well, I would have never done this had it not been for Wyvetta telling, you know, we had to pick an element. Water would never have existed without that. I would never have thought to even, you know. So what Water did, and what was so important, was it gave identity. Because you had radar grain, and then you had trace and then signal, and then you had water. You know, there was sort of, you know, it gave it gave a sense of identity to this project, to this ongoing thing. And Water was a really far extension of what you had with animals and people in Radar Grain. You know, it was the next evolution past that style. with writing in sections. I guess what you would call modular writing. And I took it to ridiculous extremes. So, I mean, I put the stuff in here. I mean, and this is where you start getting really heavy into the language shift stuff. So the whole bit about Dance on Water, I fucking took some of that stuff from sea shanties. I would take sea shanties and rewrite parts of them and take stuff out and cut it down the middle and only use 3 words out of it and then put, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it starts off with the water, water chant. You know, it goes... And then the other thing was water was designed. I had made the decision I wasn't going to talk about the war and stuff. I wasn't going to talk about the culture around the war, but water was very much it was very much about the Iraq War. Water is a lot about, it's way political, but it's political in a way that I don't think anybody would ever be able to figure out. There's stuff in here about pansexuality. There's stuff in here about gay rights, gay marriage, but in ways that people could never fathom, really. And then there's a lot of stuff in here about Ireland, and I picked Ireland for a reason, you know, because I sort of, how do I put it? Like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine, Israel, using Ireland as sort of a distended, not entirely real worldly, but abstract version of that, like a Europe, like taking it out of the context of that and putting it in Europe, and using Ireland as a symbol, you know, because they've been attempted to be appropriated by Rome or by London, you know, and sometimes the people themselves have had weird allegiances to shit, you know. And then some of the people who, you know, and then there's the terrorism and the, you know, at what point is it a freedom fighter? At what point is it a terrorist? And on, asking all those sorts of things. Because I do believe in a free Ireland, but without London and without Rome. You know, get the religion out, get the fucking tanks out, you know, and deal with it as people having a piece of land and actually moving forward, you know, without pre-existing belief systems, you know, and sort of taking that as a metaphor for whatever, you know, the Middle East or Africa or whatever. I sort of, you know, that's the political ideal, right? And then there's a lot of stuff in there. There's, you know, there's a lot of Gaelic stuff that I put in here, and then there's actually one of the things that I'm really proud of is, and I think most people would probably think it's bunk or something, but I'm really, really, really proud of it, is the Land of Groats section, which is actually the northernmost tip of Scotland, I believe. And I looked all this stuff up, and it sort of travels through the Isles, and it sort of goes through the British Empire, and but it ends with sort of like a combination of like Scottish phonetic stuff, and then Gaelic terms, and then my own like more crick-dillicky kind of things that I just was putting in there, and I just put that all together, and then mixed that in with actual English and actual lines from the poem. So it's like a completely like fucking alternate universe of English at that point, you know. And I was really, really, really proud of that. And then, you know, there's scientific facts about water. This thing was built out over several weeks, and it was really beautiful. The where it ends with the endless ocean, that was written in the apartment in Oak Park. It was very. I actually took the day off from work, and I just sat alone all day, and it was very gray, and it was raining. And I just sat there and thought about it, and like thought about what I wanted to say, you know. And then I sat down and I wrote maybe like the first 2 verses, and then I went and sat back down a little bit, and then I went and sit and finished the rest off. And it was really, really, really deliberate and measured, and I can remember exactly like everything about writing that. But that was maybe over the course of like 2 or 3 hours, or maybe even a little bit longer. And I would just sort of go and sit, and then I would go to the computer, you know, and just sort of back and forth. But I like never left that room, and I never broke concentration. I wasn't like doing anything on the internet, or, you know what I mean? But I knew it had to end that way. I knew it had to end with like the person alone at the ocean, because I was then sort of thinking about it like, you know, like you've traveled this land mass, and you are now at the, you know, like you're now like in California or something, you know, and you're at the end of the there's nowhere else you can go except into the ocean, you know. So, yeah. It's really fucking fantastic. And then, you know, there's all this stuff with the artwork. There's a lot of, like, you know, if you really look at the artwork, both the front cover and back cover, and then the inside pictures in water, and you really understand what water is about, and you really understand what the other one in there, Fingernail in My Salad, is about, it's really, really, really political, you know. And it's funny because, like, all the photos on the inside are like family photos, basically. Liz took some, but others were family photos. And it's presented to look like it's like a nostalgic thing, but it's not at all nostalgic. But I'll leave you to figure that stuff out. I'll leave you to figure out, like, connect the dots on that stuff. Maybe someday I'll be more explicit, but I sort of created like a little puzzle for people to figure out. But it was one of my most political statements ever. But no one would ever have figured out that it was political. All right. Life Isn't Hard.
2005.
2005, Life Isn't Hard. This was the last hit. This was the last time I ever had a single kind of individual piece that, like, people seem to sort of rally around and get excited about. It's really never happened again. Fuck them. So, okay. So we did Scatter. That took most of 2004. And Scatter is not represented in this collection because I couldn't figure out a way to break it apart. It just wouldn't work. And I had taken the Scatter, quote, single version and used that in First 4 Years. And I felt it really dominated First 4 Years. Not in a bad way, but but I thought if I use it again in here, it's going to dominate the shit out of this, and I can't do that. So anyway, so Life Isn't Hard was we had finished Scatter. That ended up coming out at the beginning of 2005. We went to the South. We did our tour of the South, filmed 75% of a movie, which will eventually be finished, and I was kind of on vacation. I didn't really do much in 2005, and the summer rolled around, and this window here, a very big picture window, and they have a fireworks display around 4th of July every year. So I pulled the blinds all the way up, and there was this fireworks display, so I could watch it from the window, and best seat in the house kind of thing. And I was watching the fireworks, and I just thought, I want to write something. I just got the, you know, the sense, like, okay, I'm gonna write this. And Life Isn't Hard. There's sort of a few ideas happening in there. There was an attack at the time in London. I think it was Al Qaeda did an attack on, like, the London Underground. And part of it had been foiled, but like 15 people had been injured. You know,
Was it London or was it Spain?
No, it was London. It was London, and it was partly inspired by that. I had this sort of idea of like the ground rebelling against people. That was sort of my anti-war statement. Or one of my anti-war statements was the earth itself just starts saying no. The earth itself would, like, fuck with people, like, attempting to wage war. It would, like, just sort of move people away.
That's good.
So there was that idea. That was a part of it. The other part of it was the stuff about the professors, was the idea of, like, I sort of got these characters in my head of, you know, like a father and son professor, and they're each professors and they don't get along, and they're sort of teaching at the same university, but they're teaching contradictory stuff, you know, and so that is sort of alluded to in there. And then I was reading this thing about this guy. He was on Saturday Night Live in the early 80s. And he had, I forget the name of the psychological disorder, but I became really obsessed with it for a while. He thought that everything in his house, including his family, were fakes. That his family had been replaced, and that everything in his house had been replaced with a replica. And there's a name for it. I forget the disorder. But he eventually had to be put away.
This is from Saturday Night Live?
Yeah. And apparently there's like 300 or 400 cases this year. You know? And I was, at the time, I was reading a lot about, and this sort of tied in, at the time I was reading a lot about zombies, like living zombies in Haiti. And I was, you know, and there's always stuff like the Witness Relocation Program, but, you know, I've read stuff about, you know, like real kind of conspiracy theory stuff about, like, the government, like, replacing people with, like, an actor, just to see if they can do it, just to see if they can, like, fucking take people out and not cause a disturbance in the community and shit, you know? And so that's where the whole sort of end portion of Life Isn't Hard came from reading about that stuff and thinking a lot about that. And so all of these elements... Now, once again, I mean, I cannot fucking tell you how these things fit together. Do you know what I mean? Other than they fit together to me, and I combine them and I fucking write something. You know? I probably couldn't tell you the logical line of how these things are, what they are, what connects them. And then to call it Life Isn't Hard, to call it something ridiculous like that, that's the most absurd title of all times, you know. But at the time, I was also thinking that, though. But life isn't hard in a sense, because you have to eat, and you have to breathe, and you have to have water, and you have to have shelter. And in that sense, life isn't hard. You know, like, you have to kind of, like, and you need to be, like, you know, it's important to, like, feel loved and whatever. You know, so, but doing those things, I guess, can be incredibly hard. And then there's all the whatever intellectualization and whatever. But I was thinking about, like, on some level, life isn't hard, because on some level, human beings don't do anything that insects don't do. You know, human beings fight for their jobs, and they fight for their families, and they defend people, they defend causes or whatever. But that's a non-physical, for the most part, version of, I mean, if you take an insect who's crawling and you cut it in half, it's still going to keep trying to crawl, you know. Human beings do the same thing that insects or animals do. I mean, you know, an animal that's hit by a car is still going to try to get to the, you know, well, what makes it do that, you know? Why does the insect keep crawling when it's been cut in half, you know? And, you know, on that level, life isn't hard, because we're doing the same thing that everything else does. Yeah. You know, trees are trying to fucking keep growing, and, you know, so how all of that ties together. But see, I don't feel that that's my job as the artist to fucking, I don't feel that that's what I'm supposed to do. I feel like I'm supposed to put the things together. I don't feel it's my fucking function to say, well, do you know what I mean? And give a fucking breakdown of,
absolutely,
you know. So those are the elements that went into Life Isn't Hard. You know, and you know, it was very important to me. The tone of it was very important. I didn't want to have it be a despairing tone. You know, the thing about, especially the Zeros, was everybody was really fucking negative. Everybody was really fucking, like, miserablest, you know, and everybody was, like, in this, like, paralytic state about George Bush and whatever. And the thing that was really important to me, and even, like, water and fingernail in my salad, there was and hell, for that matter, Scatter. I really wanted I actually went back and started rereading all the Ginsberg stuff, and you know, that kind of all assumed a new level of importance to me because of the and even like the Star Spangled Death, and you know, the kind of joyful exploratory aspect of it. That assumed a new level of importance to me, you know. I guess, kind of refusing to be miserable and kind of refusing to let the regime...
Yeah, kind of define the whole tone of your existence by the minutia of some goings-on that happen to be occurring around you.
Yeah.
Letting that define your time for existence.
Yeah, yeah. So, the tone of Life Isn't Hard was really important. I wanted there to be a, I don't know. I wanted there to be like a vibe of like we're getting away with something. Like we're...
Joyful exploratory.
Yeah. So that's Life Isn't Hard. That's... I don't really know what else there is to say about it. I think the meters and I think the rhythms of the stuff are really good. I think I'm very kind of proud of it. I think it turned out really well. That was another one that was written in bits and pieces over a period of time. It was sort of written like water. It was little, like one word at a time and 2 words and just, like a little fucking puzzle. Just like it was written similar to water in that sense, It wasn't like a definitive time and place when I wrote it. It was just bit by bit. So,